Someone Like You by Sparkypasker, read by Distracted by Books. Chapter 9. Walking into work early in the morning was a surreal experience. The cafe was nice and quiet because it hadn't opened yet. There were no sweet smells because Boss was still cooking the morning pastries and Jiro was grinding the coffee beans to fill the machines. It was actually relaxing. Now, if only the rest of the day could be like this. Izuku knew that if it was, Boss would not be happy. She would prefer them to be constantly busy with a line going out the door. That would be how they could be making the most money, after all. That had never actually happened. The longest line they ever had was 4 people. For the first time, Izuku walked in through the front door of the cafe. He shouted a hello to Boss, and Jiro, as he walked to the back through the swinging door of the counter, hung up his bag and donned his apron. He then grabbed a towel and a bottle of disinfectant to clean the tables and counters of any dust that had settled during the night. The quiet of the cafe was broken by Jiro. I'm going to be leaving soon. When I start high school, I'm not going to have a lot of time to work. My last day is going to be the week before school starts. Oh, Izuku said absent-mindedly. Congratulations. Where are you going? I was accepted into UA's hero course. Izuku stopped cleaning and walked over to stand in front of the counter. That's awesome! He exclaimed with a fake smile and an even more fake cheer. Not that Jiro would know that. Or anyone, really. He may not be able to lie with his words or with his body language, but when it comes to his emotions, he is the best liar to have ever existed. Jealousy curled in his gut. He knew that he was going to be a crime fighter, but the dream of attending UA and becoming a hero wasn't going to just go away. Yeah, Jiro responds, but I'm nervous. Why's that? Izuku asked. Because my quirk is just not that powerful. I'm good at surveillance, but that's about it. Izuku's eye gained a fire to it that caused Jiro to take a step back. That's not it, he insisted. Your quirk is so much more than that. What do you mean? Sure, you can do surveillance, which is extremely important for heroes. Don't get me wrong. But you have offensive capabilities as well. Your ears have an aux cord on the end of them, right? Right, Jiro said slowly. Well, aux cords work in 2 ways. They can take sound in, which is how it would work for surveillance. But it can also produce sounds. Midoriya, I'm not a radio, Jiro interrupted. Well, yes and no, he replied. Explain. The chords would probably not work like, say, present mic, because they do not have anything to do with your voice. But if you plug your ears into a radio, you should be able to use your heartbeat or the sound of the blood rushing through your veins as an attack. Okay, I get how loud sounds can be used offensively, but couldn't the villains just wear headphones? They could, if that was the only thing you could do. If you had the right speaker to plug your ears into, you could use it to also adjust your bass. Have you ever ridden in a car with the music going and the song playing has a lot of bass and you can feel it vibrate in your chest? You could do something like that. Different frequencies of sound can even make physiologic changes to the body. It can be used to clear out someone's lungs or help control someone's pain. Or, in the case of what we're talking about, it could cause someone pain. Being blasted with a lot of bass could cause someone to stop what they're doing. And what if they were robbing a bank? They would probably just drop the money there and voila, the villain is caught. Jiro, your quirk has so much potential. You would be an amazing hero. Boss stuck her head out of the kitchen towards the middle of Izuku's rant. Izuku noticed a calculating look come to her eyes. He becomes wary. That was the how will this affect my profit look. Hey, Midoriya, how would you like to make a little extra cash? She asked. Izuku looked at her in surprise. I would like that, actually. How? You broke apart her quirk and found applications you weren't told about. Jiro, was what he said accurate? Do you think you would actually be able to do what he predicted? I'm not sure, Jiro said. I have a speaker in my bag, though. We could test it out quick. Jiro ran to her bag hanging on the hook and pulled a cylindrical speaker out of it. She plugged her ear into the aux port while walking back up from them. A deep thumping sound came out of the speaker. She looked at Izuku in wonder. It works, she said with a smile. Then that settles it. We will offer a quirk analyzing service for a small fee. Midoriya will analyze quirks for our customers. I will even split the profits 50-50. Okay. I can do that, Izuku said. Boss nodded her head and walked back to the kitchen, muttering about not being able to call it counseling. Something about being able to charge more, but not being worth the headaches to get licensed. That day, the cafe opened with a new A-frame sign posted out front. The Amazing Midoriya! Can I guess your quirk? 1,000 yen. Basic quirk analysis, 2,000 yen. Advanced quirk analysis, 5,000 yen. You know, analyzing quirks is really just a hobby, Izuku told Jiro as he put another 1,000 yen bill into the register after correctly guessing a customer's quirk. That was the most popular option, which is to be expected. It was Boss's idea to put it there as a teaser, like, hey, if this guy can correctly guess my quirk without any hints, then what else can he do? People in school would always call me creepy for doing what I'm being paid to do now. Well, if there is one thing Boss knows how to do, it's making money. And she seems to think this is a way to make a lot of money. I don't think I had ever seen her go 50-50 on a business deal before. Not to mention, this obscures the fact that he's quirkless, Boss whispers, bringing a fresh batch of pastries to the front for the next rush. No one would ever think someone quirkless could be that smart. Izuku feels a dull ache in his chest at the comment, but it was a familiar pain. As a kid, it was sharp and throbbing, but it mellowed out as he grew older. Not because people stopped saying it. No, never that. But because he heard it so often he could recite the entire speech by heart. That was not cool, Jiro said after Boss went back to the kitchen. There is no reason you can't be both quirkless and smart. You go analyze those quirks and show them just how wrong they are. Izuku felt a warmth settle in and tears threatened to come to his eyes. Thank you, he said with a laugh. That is exactly what I will do. Night came around quickly after that. Summer was an odd time for any business. It used to be busy both before and after school, but during breaks, the slow times were unpredictable. In fact, after that one just after lunch, there was a constant line the rest of the day. Boss came out a time or two and smiled devilishly at the last person waiting in line who was backed up right at the door. So, what are you going to do now that you've graduated? Jiro asked as Izuku was taking apart the coffee machine to clean. I applied to an online school that is for quirkless students. It's called St. Damian's School for the Quirkless. Really? My dad is an alumni, Jiro said cheerfully. He said that school was the only reason he's successful. Yep, if you're quirkless, you pretty much can't do anything with your life unless you get accepted there. I took the entrance exam yesterday, so hopefully I will find out soon if I was accepted. It was pretty fun, actually. It's been a long time since I was challenged like that. Jiro begins laughing. That's hilarious. When I was about to take my entrance exam to UA, Dad told me about the horror that was his high school entrance exam. I will have to tell him you enjoyed it and see what he says. Izuku genuinely laughed. Gosh, that felt good. He doesn't remember the last time he actually full out laughed at something. Then he got quiet. Actually, that's not the only thing I'm doing, he said. Oh, Jiro probes, mopping the cafe's floor. Yeah, I'm also going to be a crime fighter. You're also going to a hero school? Why go to both and not just the hero school? No, not a hero, a crime fighter. What's the difference? Mostly that heroes have a license to use their quirk. Because I don't have a quirk, I don't need a license. So all I need to catch villains is a license to arrest. So, like a police officer? Kind of? Izuku said in frustration, except that police officers are not allowed to engage the villains. Their jobs are to investigate, save civilians, do crowd control, and physically arrest the villains. Crime fighters can do all of that. So they fight villains and arrest them. Heroes aren't allowed to technically arrest villains. They can hold them until the police arrive to arrest them, but they can't formally arrest them. I'm not sure if I explained that well. No, I get it. You get to be the best of both worlds. You get to fight and arrest villains and save people. That is so cool. She scrunched her face up in confusion. But there are no rules that quirkless people can't be heroes. Why not just go to a hero school? Izuku sighed. You're right, that there is no rule saying I can't go to a hero school. But it would be required to take the same entrance exam as everyone else. Tell me, you took the UA Hero course entrance exam. Do you honestly think someone quirkless would have been able to pass? Jiro guiltily looked down. We had to destroy robots. I found a piece of rebar laying on the ground and used it to break them. There were so many people taking the exam that I had to go to the alleys to find some that weren't already taken by other participants. I used my quirk to find the robots. If you were in my place, you probably wouldn't have been able to find enough robots to pass. Izuku nodded. Exactly. And even if I did end up finding enough and passing, more than likely they would not have allowed me to attend anyway. I guess. But you know what? Then this quirk, an analyzing thing, may actually be good for you then. You think? Izuku asked, unconvinced. Yeah, as a crime fighter, you will be fighting people with quirks. The faster you are at breaking down a quirk, the easier it will be for you to fight against it. Like, for example, if you were fighting me, what would you do? Well, since I already know how it works, I guess I could just break your speaker. And if you wanted to try and kill me by plugging the aux cords directly into my body, I could just cut them off. Jiro winced at the mention of using her villainous using villainous tactics, which she was going to store in the back of her mind for emergency situations. She wasn't stupid. She knew being a hero was a dangerous career choice and that she may find herself in a life-threatening situation. Her dad told her enough stories growing up that she knew that sometimes underhanded techniques were needed to simply stay alive. She felt a phantom pain at imagining her cords being cut off. Well, yep, that would certainly be a decisive way to make sure I couldn't hurt anyone again. Good job. What do you think about analyzing now? Izuku smiled. I think you're right. This is the perfect way for me to practice the skills I need to make sure I can win any fights I start. He bounced on the toes of his feet. Jiro giggled a little. It actually made him look like an excited green bunny. Oh, maybe I should bring my notebooks. That way I can keep track of customers and be ready in case they want something more in depth. I doubt they would want to wait long for me to write out something for them. I should also... Izuku's speech became quieter and quicker to the point where Jiro could no longer understand what he was saying. But that was okay. She continued cleaning and closing down the shop, Izuku's mumbling acting as background noise. By the time everything was finished and Jiro and Izuku were walking out the front door, Izuku said, Okay, I have a plan. Good. I expect to see you put it into action the next time we work together, got it? Jiro said with false strictness. Izuku put his hand to his head in a salute. Aye, aye, Captain. Jiro and Izuku laughed, walking the same direction for 1 block before splitting ways to go home. Chapter 10. It didn't take 3 days for Izuku to hear back from St. Damian's. The results were more than what he could have hoped for. He was accepted. Of course, he was accepted. He would not tolerate anything less from himself, but that wasn't all. He also received a full ride scholarship. Izuku had hoped that he would, but he wasn't sure what his score would have to be in order to get it. Izuku was under no illusion that most of the students attending that school had wealthy families. No school could function without having some sort of income. That meant that those who came from families without money had to be especially exceptional to take the place of a student that could provide the school with income. In fact, the school is effectively losing money by also providing that student with a scholarship. Sure, the physical space the student is taking doesn't cost the school anything, but the resources the student uses while at school does. But that wasn't all. St. Damien is also going to sponsor Izuku to attend any university of his choice. This was far more than what he could have expected. With these, Izuku could be successful no matter what he chose to do. He didn't have to be a crime fighter in order to have a life, but he still wanted to. With his education, he could help people however he chose, but he couldn't not be a crime fighter. Yes, he could be a doctor, a teacher, a counselor. He could literally do anything, but that's just it. He could do anything. And what he wanted to do was be a crime fighter. He had never actually known how much he wanted that until it wasn't his only option anymore. Izuku was ecstatic. He had never been so happy to start a school. Unfortunately, he would have to wait. Due to being located in the U.S., St. Damien's follows the American school schedule. That means school doesn't start until August. And if Izuku thought about it, that was actually good for him. He could concentrate on getting what he needed to be a crime fighter and getting a patrol schedule in place before school starts. He didn't have to do everything at the same time. Not that he couldn't do that, but doing it this way will just be so much easier. All this good news gave Izuku so much energy. He wasn't going to be able to concentrate on anything at home. So it was probably a good idea to get out of the house. He had gotten his first paycheck just the night before, so maybe it would be a good time to go buy his first phone. Inko had never bought Izuku a phone. Said he didn't have anyone he would ever need to contact, so he didn't need it. And even if he did have someone to call, they didn't have the money. Izuku knew that as a single income household, finances were tight. That was why Izuku needed to chip in wherever he could. He knew this. But just once, he wanted to do something for himself. Now that he had banking information, he had given it to Boss for direct deposit of his paychecks in the future. But the first was given to him in cash. Inko would never even know it existed, and as long as Izuku kept the phone hidden, she would never find out. Izuku left and headed for the train station. He was happy they had switched to automatic tellers when he was in the later years of elementary school. Before that, Izuku had to basically sneak on the train. No one else would let him on. He always made sure to leave enough money to cover the trip whenever he had any anyway. As he got older and the money left for him became more scarce, he ended up having to sneak on more and more often. It always ate him up inside. He couldn't stand doing something criminal, even if it was something so minor. He can't even talk himself into jaywalking. He always had to walk to a crosswalk or something just doesn't feel right to him. So now that he has more access to money, he promised himself that if he ever had to take the train, he would always pay. It doesn't make up for him not doing so when he was younger, but it's better than continuing to not pay. This time, he was going to Southern Mustafa. Normally, when he has to go shopping or something like that, he goes to the north. It's a little more of an upscale neighborhood, and as long as you are polite, no one questions where you came from or what you do. Why? Because it's where most of the heroes in the city are located. You can't turn around without coming into contact with a hero. Because of this, crime is really low. The citizens don't question anything because if anything was wrong, a hero would have already taken care of it. Not to mention so many more people that live in that area. It makes it easy for Izuku to slip into a crowd. He is rather plain looking after all. Even if someone found out he was quirkless, people don't know him. If someone told their friend that they saw a quirkless kid and was asked what they looked like, they wouldn't be able to say. Going shopping there gives Izuku a sense of anonymity. Unfortunately, that also meant that when purchasing something legit, they make you show identification. And due to the identification laws, quirks are required to be listed along with hair color, eye color, and height. There is no way anyone there would sell him a phone with an ID that lists quirkless. Izuku could even try to go to a hero or police officer to report it, but he would just be told, sorry, they have the right to refuse anyone's service for any reason. He knows. He tried that once. It did nothing but make him a laughing stock. So, therefore, he was going to the south. That's where the older area of town was. It was beautiful once upon a time, but as the years went by and the city council started to build more and more to the north, the south was forgotten. The homes and businesses were in disarray. The people made a lower yearly salary and it was harder to find a job. This gave rise to less heroes and more crime. The entire area was now guarded by a few brave police officers, a couple underground heroes, and a handful of vigilantes. In other words, not nearly enough to make the area safe. But it's also those qualities that make it a perfect place for Izuku to purchase a phone. It is not uncommon for people with, quote, villainous or, quote, undesirable quirks, or even the hidden quirkless, to live in these areas. The businesses don't bother to ID anyone. The equipment is also, technically, unregistered, and it's not like it's illegal to purchase an unregistered phone. In fact, the police force does it all the time to give their CIs an untraceable way to contact their handler. If the police can do it, then it's good enough for Izuku. Plus, it wouldn't be a bad idea to have an untraceable phone as a crime fighter anyway. He probably won't stop anything more than the common purse snatcher, but people can be vindictive. If they decide to go after him, he doesn't want them to be able to trace him back home. Not because he's worried about Inko or anything like that, because he is sure she would give him up in a heartbeat. But it's where he lives. What would he do if villains could just show up at his house? That's one of the reasons why heroes have confidential personnel files. That and fans with stalker tendencies. He was so glad he would not have to put up with that. Once he arrived at South Mustafa, he found an electronics store close by the station. He may have had a lot more muscle than he did last year and even know a few moves from copying videos online, but he wasn't stupid. He didn't have any equipment with him. He would need at least a lead pipe in order to defend himself from someone with a physical quirk. He would probably be able to take on someone with a mental quirk, but anyone else would require a weapon of some kind, and it's not like he would so conveniently be able to find a spare pipe just laying on the ground somewhere, so he wasn't going any further into the area than he had to. Izuku found the phone display and took a look at the options. If it was something he was going to take with him on patrols, he needed it to be sturdy. He didn't really care about what it looked like. It's not like anyone was even going to know he had it. On the top of the rack, above the eyesight of the average height Japanese, was a phone that literally looked like a brick. It was thick and rectangular, but it was also extremely cheap. He took it down and looked at the specs. It claimed to be able to function in 30 foot of water and be able to survive a 50-foot fall. There had to be a catch. Why would something that strong be this cheap? Oh, that was why. The phone was manufactured nearly 20 years prior. The phone was not meant to hold many of the apps and features that the newer phones have. It could only call and receive text messages. It didn't even have GPS. But that was fine with Izuku. He had been locked out of his apartment, quote, accidentally enough as a child to know the majority of Mustafa like the back of his hand. The only thing he didn't know was the interior of the South. But that would be easy enough to memorize when he went on patrol. He had already decided that was probably where he was going to patrol. It needed the most help, and he couldn't just ignore the people there because of where they lived. They needed more help, and he was going to give it to them. Izuku took the phone to the register, paid for it. The cashier looked a little miffed that he didn't buy something more expensive, but didn't actually say anything about it, and left. He was on the next train back to Central Mustafa in just under 30 minutes. While riding the train back to his neighborhood, Izuku set up his phone. It wasn't exactly difficult. He didn't know what his classmates at Aldero were complaining about. A few times during his time there, he would hear one of them say they had dropped and broke their phone and had to get a new one. They always complained about having to transfer everything to a new phone and the data they had lost. Maybe that was why Izuku wasn't having any problems. Old phone and first phone, so nothing to transfer and no data to lose. That was something he would have to think about in the future. It may actually be beneficial to reconfigure the phone with a customized operating system. Who knows when he will have to hack into something. It would be easier to do it using his phone rather than having to run home and use his computer. And because it's older, it wouldn't have the increased security to get rid of that newer ones have. He could create his own security. Izuku wasn't sure he would be able to trust the security that came with the phone anyway. He has cracked into enough phones for practice to know that it's abysmal. Izuku added that to his mental to-do list. Once he was back to his neighborhood, he still had some excited energy. Nearby his apartment was a park. It had been a while since he had practiced his parkour, and Izuku thought that would be a good way to work off his excess energy. He looked at his phone, then decided to put it on the ground under the equipment he would be using. Supposedly it wouldn't break, but he didn't want to take that chance. He would have to remember that problem when he bought his outfit. Izuku jumped onto the jungle gym and brought himself into a handstand. When he first started practicing parkour months ago, he was absolutely horrible. He couldn't even hold up his own weight, let alone do anything with it. He could move around how he wanted now, but he still wasn't nearly as good as that underground hero he had found a couple of videos of online. Izuku had to save each video he found to his computer because every time one was put up, it was taken down almost immediately. Izuku wouldn't be surprised if he had the most extensive video collection of the man. His name was Eraserhead, and Izuku has analyzed every single microsecond of his movements. He believed he was close to nailing his moves, but would need more time to burn them into his muscle memory. He jumped from the jungle gym and ran along some balance bars. Then he continued to run around the park in a loop, making his own obstacle course out of the equipment available. He went through the motions again and again, perfecting each mistake and finishing the course faster and faster. After about an hour, and at the start of his next run, Izuku was interrupted. "Hey, that's pretty cool. Are you training to be a hero?" Izuku was asked by a boy about his age. The boy had short, blonde, shaggy hair and wore jeans and an orange cotton t-shirt. His quirk was fairly obvious. He had a large, thick tail protruding from his lower back. The tail was topped with the same color and texture of hair that was on his head. "Yeah, something like that," Izuku responds. "Parkour is a good skill to have," the boy continues. "I tried to do it myself, but I'm not nearly as good as you are. How long have you been doing parkour?" "Probably around 6 or 7 months," Izuku replied. "Wow, that's really impressive. I would have thought you'd been doing it for years. I practiced karate, and I know that I wasn't nearly that good only 6 months in." "How long have you been doing karate?" "Since I was about 4. My uncle owns a dojo and began teaching me as soon as he thought I was old enough. Where are you learning to fight? That's cool. I'm not really learning anywhere. I mostly just watch videos of a hero online. I see. Why don't you join a dojo? Izuku paused for a moment. This was stranger. Should he tell him? Izuku had never seen this boy around before, and it was likely that even if Izuku told him he was quirkless, he would never see him again anyway. I'm quirkless, Izuku told him before he lost his nerves. Ah, insurance? Yeah, how'd you know? Izuku asked in surprise. Well, you know how I said my uncle owns a dojo? Yeah. What I didn't mention is that before he started it, my parents looked around to all sorts of dojos for me. I had wanted to be a hero as soon as I knew what one was. But none of the dojos around where we live would allow someone with a mutation quirk to enroll. They claimed their insurance said it was too much of a liability. Yeah, that sounds familiar. Yeah, I may not know what it's like to be quirkless, but I have a pretty good idea. My tail has made it difficult for me to do things that would be simple for a normal person. Gosh, I hate people. You and me both. Izuku and the boy stood in silence for a moment. The conversation had met its natural end, and due to them not knowing each other, they didn't know how to start it up again. Izuku stretched his muscles, not wanting them to get cold. It would be rude to begin running again while someone was there and wanting to talk to him. By the way, I never introduced myself. My name is Ojiro Mashiro. I'm Midoriya Izuku. It's nice to meet you. Same here. It was quiet again for a minute. You know, I'm the only person in my family with a tail. Oh? Izuku was always ready to talk about quirks. There was always something to learn, and there was so much that was not known. He was planning on taking an elective about quirk science, and he was extremely excited about it. Yeah, everyone else in my family can create new arms or legs. I was born with mine. Did you know that if even one of my parents had had tails as well, I would have been considered quirkless? How? The government does not consider all mutations quirks. This is because there are many mutations that people have that are in no one related to their quirks. But I work with someone who has the exact same quirk as their mother, and it causes them to have ox cords for ears. But are the mutations the only thing they have? Can they do anything with the cords? Well, yeah. They can use them to listen in on conversations and use them to project their heartbeat. Well, that's what the difference is. Their mutations are not actually their quirk. The projection of their heartbeat and their increased senses are their quirk. The mutation just allows them to use it. For me, my tail is my quirk. I can use it just as easily as I can use my arms or my legs, but it doesn't actually do anything. I think I understand. I watched Mount Lady a few months ago. She was fighting this villain that had a gigantification quirk like she did, but he had facial features that almost made him look like a shark. But being a shark did not have anything to do with the quirk. It was just a general mutation because that's what his parents must have looked like. Exactly. Ojiro nodded. Then does that mean there are far more legally quirkless people out there than what is reported? That's right. Cute ribbit. A new voice spoke up. Izuku and Ojiro looked to their left and found a girl about their age. She had long green hair that was tied in a bow at the end. She had the features of a frog, was hunched slightly, and had her forefinger resting on her chin. I thought that you could only be diagnosed as quirkless if you have a second joint in your pinky toe, Izuku responded. That's how it's done for people who don't have a mutation and haven't developed a quirk yet. All people with mutations go to a physical at the age of 8. If they can prove their quirk is more than just how they look, they have a quirk. If they look like their parents and can't do anything, then they are considered quirkless, Ojiro said. Fortunately, I have never had to do more than walk into a room with my parents. When they saw I had a tail, and they didn't, they said, "You have a quirk," and showed me the door. You are more lucky than I am, then, Ribbit, the girl said. My parents both have frog mutations, so I was scrutinized. They pretty much used any reason they could think of to make me quirkless. It didn't work, Ribbit. And I hope it's the same for my siblings, Ribbit. She pointed to the ground next to her. Izuku and Ojiro looked to where she was pointing and found two little tadpoles staring back at them. They had large eyes like their sister, but stood straight instead of hunched. Well, aren't you adorable? Ojiro said, crouching down to be at eye level. What are your names? He asked. I'm Asui Suyu, the older sister said. This is my brother, Samidare, and my sister, Satsuki Ribbit. She said, pointing to each of her siblings. The two younger children hid behind their sister. What did you have to do to dodge the quirkless label? Izuku asked. I had to spit out my stomach. No normal person can do that, so they said that's my quirk. It's called frog. Basically, it just means I can do anything a frog can do. I can also camouflage myself and secrete a toxin from my skin, but it's really just an irritant, Ribbit. Ojiro nodded his head, and Izuku had to use his fingers to pinch together his lips to keep from nerding out about Asui. Izuku wasn't sure how to make friends exactly, but if his time at Aldera Middle School taught him anything, it was that people thought his muttering was creepy. He didn't want to drive away people who were willing to talk to him. Hey, you know what? My uncle's dojo is around here. He specializes in teaching those with mutant quirks in how to use them in self-defense. I could ask if he is willing to teach you, Ojiro said. Really? Izuku asked. If you could, I would really appreciate it. Could you ask for myself as well, Ribbit? Asui asked. I want to learn how to fight better, Ribbit. The most I can do right now is throw myself at my enemies, Ribbit. Sure, I can do that. Give me your phone numbers and I will text you when I find out. Izuku ran across the park to grab his phone from underneath the jungle gym. He wasn't worried about it being stolen. It was an old-looking phone. No one was going to even touch it. He ran back to Ojiro and Asui, who had each other's phones and were just finishing putting their phone numbers in. Izuku gave his phone to Asui first, as she gave him Ojiro's. He put his number into Ojiro's phone, then gave it back to him. Ojiro gave him Asui's phone. Izuku put his number in it, then gave it to Asui, who had given Izuku's phone to Ojiro. Ojiro and Asui had barely given Izuku's phone a curious glance, but Izuku noticed that theirs wasn't exactly the newest model either. Ojiro left the park soon after, and Asui followed her siblings to play on the equipment. Although Izuku still wanted to check the numbers, he was feeling confident in himself. After all, he just bought a new phone and was heading home with 2 new numbers. End of chapter.